This is Memorial Day weekend in the United States. Originally called Decoration Day, it was created as a time set aside to decorate the graves of soldiers fallen in battle, specifically at the end of the American Civil War. It has naturally expanded to include honoring the dead from all wars. And it is that honoring I want to talk about this morning. How do we honor those who served and were killed in war? As Unitarian Universalists, we like to talk a lot about the inherent worth and dignity of all people, but we sometimes get stuck when it comes to those whose job is war. We are a people committed to peace, and yet we live in a time and in a world where war is the reality. What does it mean to honor someone? How do we act with honor? Merriam-Webster defines honor as a person's reputation or esteem, or a showing of respect or recognition. A person of superior standing is often addressed as Your Honor. In college or in school, we work hard to achieve high honors. This is Memorial Day weekend. It is a time when we talk a lot about honoring those who died in wartime service, but honor is so complex. There are many degrees of honor and of honoring. We can honor someone with a ticker tape parade or a Nobel Peace Prize or a plaque on a park bench. Or we can honor someone through something more lasting, like changes in policy or behavior. When a friend dies of cancer, sometimes we are inspired to honor their memory by stopping smoking. We'll get back to honor shortly, because first we need to talk about sacrifice. I was curious to learn that Merriam-Webster defines sacrifice first as an act of offering to a deity. Offering that deity something precious, specifically killing someone or something on an altar. It's also defined as something given up or lost, or the destruction or surrender of something for the sake of something else. So in the context of Memorial Day, we tend to think of sacrifice in terms of lives lost in pursuit of a military objective, to win the war, stop the rise of communism, unseat a dictator, or restore peace to a particular region. We think in terms of people who sacrifice their own freedom by joining the armed forces. These people are considered to have sacrificed their own wants and desires, putting aside their own ambitions to serve a larger cause. And then there are the hapless enlisted who are conscripted through the draft, who would rather not march off to war, but who are set to be sacrificed by their government in pursuit of that military or political goal. Their families sacrifice, certainly, but out of necessity, not out of some freely chosen noble altruism. We cannot consider this kind of sacrifice without speaking aloud the reality that economics and opportunity play in the role in the decision of how many young people come to enlist. Some volunteer to serve out of a sense of honor. There's honor again. But many others join for more pragmatic reasons, for opportunities to get an education or training, to see the world, for the GI Bill that will help them get an education and a mortgage when they're done their enlistment. Others enlist to run away from something. Small town kids with no hopes and no options. My own father joined the Navy in order to avoid prosecution. It was a time when a young man could do such a thing, and the charges would be dismissed. He had been in a car accident while drinking and permanently disabled a man. When he showed up at court for the pretrial hearing, he informed the judge that he had enlisted in the Seabees and was due to ship out within the week. The judge told him to keep his nose clean until he left town, and the charges would be dropped. And they were. That's how things worked back then. And truth be told, it's how my father got the training to be a machinist, which served him and our family in his civilian life. Did he join out of a sense of honor? Not even close. Was his service a sacrifice? It's hard to say. He certainly gave up 3 years of his life in service to the military, but I'm not sure he would not have sacrificed some similar amount of his freedom had he not enlisted. So sacrifice, like honor, is relative. And to understand either, they have to be considered in context. A parent sacrifices their own comfort to provide for their child. A nation sacrifices the lives of its soldiers to capture or free a particular piece of real estate. We honor our war dead by decorating their graves on the last Monday in May. And we honor their legacy, how? By perpetuating a culture of war. In the 242-year history of this nation, we have been at war for 225 of those years. We have had just 17 years in which we were not at war with somebody. America has been at war for a very long time, more than 200 years. And when war is your natural state, you tend to find or create wars, even during times of peace, just because it's more familiar, more comfortable. We know what to do when we have an enemy. So this week in particular, the question that comes to me, do we honor our war dead by our behavior today? Do we honor our dead by behaving in ways that our soldiers once fought and died to end? In the 1930s, in Germany, Hitler's government gradually stripped away the rights and liberties of a variety of groups: Jews, the Roma Gypsies, gay men, Jehovah's Witnesses, sex workers, political opponents of the Reich. First, they were demonized, called liars and traitors and enemies of the state. They were prohibited from running for office and then from holding any government jobs, including teaching, particularly teaching at university. They were denied government services. Their children were not permitted to attend school with the other Germans. Then they were arrested and detained. Families were split up, sometimes husbands from wives, sometimes children from parents, sometimes both. And then they were moved from place to place, eventually ending up in concentration camps where they were worked to death, tortured, or killed, or some combination thereof. And so the news this week in 2018 has been flooded with stories of how immigration and customs enforcement officers have taken more than 7,000 children from immigrant parents. Some legally here seeking asylum, and removed those children from their parents for an indefinite period of time, held someplace unknown to those parents. And our government, having taken 7,000 children, have managed to misplace 1,500 of them. That cannot be accounted for. The children taken from the immigrant parents range in age from teenagers to infants. One 53 weeks old. That child is not even walking yet. And yet agents of our governments literally pried children, infants, from the arms of their parents and placed them in facilities that can only be described as concentration camps, warehouses. Children are herded into rooms separated by chain link fences. If they are on medications, that is abandoned. They are sleeping on thin blankets, on cement floors, locked behind chain link gates, sorted by age and sex. So you are aware, I have not been hunting around in the wild and woolly, murky parts of the internet to come up with these stories. This is the New York Times. This is MSNBC. This is, what was the one? PBS, Dateline. Even Snopes is confirming, which is an authority. When the world heard about this kind of stuff in Germany in the 1930s, many found it too outlandish to believe. That can't be real. That can't be real. People would stop that, wouldn't they? Officers can refuse to carry out those orders, can't they? Others dismissed the charges as inflated, arguing that the Jews and Roma being targeted, they were criminals anyway. I mean, they were trying to go where they shouldn't go. And if arrested, they would be separated from their children when that happened, so what's the difference? White House Chief of Staff John Kelly, in the last week or two, used exactly that language in an interview on 60 Minutes. He argued that immigrants were breaking the law and going to be detained anyway, and would be separated from their children when that happened. Besides, he said, the children would be cared for. They would be, quote, put in facilities, foster care, or whatever. He said that this policy would provide a strong deterrent to people who would try to come to the United States, either illegally or through legal challenges to seek asylum. This is our world. This is our country today. Now, the reality of what happens is that once the children are separated from their parents, they are often brought to distant parts of the country, to detention centers, before they get a hearing to determine their status. Toddlers, as you might imagine, do not make great witnesses. Nor would any child who had just experienced such a traumatic event. So what happens is the kids are designated unaccompanied minors, as though they had no parents to begin with, or that they were abandoned. And they are turned over to the Department of Health and Human Services for placement in foster homes or whatever. Now, the DHHS, Department of Health and Human Services, you may recall, had its budget gutted by the current administration, and it is in desperate need to find some kind of homes for these kids. So desperate, in fact, that they're relaxing the screening process for foster parents and people willing to sponsor the children so they can eventually become citizens. They no longer check for foster care licenses. They no longer check references. They no longer do FBI background checks. Essentially, if you can fill out an application in something more serious than crayon, you can get custody of immigrant children. Human trafficking agents are organizing sponsors for these children and forcing them to work in factory farms where they may or may not get to attend school, where they work until late in the night in meat processing plants, giant chicken barns, and live in unheated trailers with no plumbing. Their paychecks are seized each week and paid back largely to the company for rent and food. It is a living nightmare. The Department of Health and Human Services actually turns children over to traffickers. As a matter of policy. This is because we have a war on immigration, which seems mostly to be a war on immigrants. In wartime, lots of things get sacrificed. Soldiers get sacrificed. The truth gets sacrificed. Right and wrong get sacrificed. So how do we honor these sacrifices? How do we acknowledge them and work so that such sacrifices do not happen again? Remember that honor is a complex notion. It includes ideas like dignity, integrity, reputation, virtue, achievement, and privilege. How is it that we apply those things to the sacrifices we see happening before us? And this is one of those days as a minister when I don't have any answers. I don't know what to say in the face of a report that says our government seized 7,000 children from their parents and then lost 20% of them. Can't find them. Don't know where they went. I don't have an answer. This is not something I was trained for. There are no pastoral care classes in seminary entitled What to Do in the Face of a Fascist Takeover of the Government, or How to Resist the Fourth Reich. I got nothing. Like Pandora, who opened the box and unleashed troubles upon the world, but found hope at the very bottom. All I can come up with today is the notion of peace. Peace is the opposite of war. Peace seems like the thing that will stop requiring sacrifice, or at least the dead. Peace seems like the best way I know to honor the sacrifice of those killed in any number of wars. And by war dead, I include those who died on the field of battle, but also those who came home and died by suicide, or those who were targeted for prosecution because of the color of their skin in America's war on drugs, which became a war on black people, or the war on poverty, which became a war on poor people. Too many people are sacrificed in all of the actions we call war in America, and the ones we don't. The conflicts in Korea and Vietnam, remember, were police actions, not wars. But our culture seems to celebrate a war on drugs or a war on Christmas. Instead of waging war, how about it if we try to wage peace for a little while? We tend to define peace by what it is not. Peace is an absence of conflict, freedom from disturbance, a state of security. So let us wage peace by waging justice. Peace is not a panacea. It is not the lollipop that makes the hurt go away. It is the thing that can only be brought about by the eradication of injustice. So let us work for peace by speaking out against oppression. Let us wage peace by working to end the trafficking of human beings and children. Let us wage peace by working toward a world where war will no longer be needed to resolve conflicts between people or nations. Let us wage peace to honor those who have sacrificed so much, voluntarily or otherwise. Let us wage peace until it becomes the natural state of things. May this be our practice and our prayer. Amen.